Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. In this video, we are going to discuss the McGill's torso test, or battery of tests, I guess you can say, because it's multiple testing to kind of take a look at the muscular endurance capability of the core muscles. Now, this is in chapter 10, the muscular training assessments chapter, arguably one of the more important, higher priority chapters for sure. And the McGill's torso muscular endurance test battery starts on page 413. Couple of things kind of to keep in mind. Just the general nature of the testing that ACE is asking you to do, or at least consider doing in chapter 10, are related generally to the ability of a client to maintain basic balance, postural stability, and in this case, core endurance. And for sure, these are really, really helpful tests that you could do with clients. In particular, the McGill's torso test really helps you to understand something about the general overall core endurance stability of your potential or your actual client. And the idea is that you need to know all sides, so front, posterior, and lateral aspects of the main musculature and the endurance capability of all of those. And so ACE will basically tell you, here's the muscles that you're generally looking at from a stabilization perspective. And in this case, obviously, the endurance component. And so therefore, the general understanding is that we can check the overall endurance capabilities of the anterior musculature of the core, right? So those would be the flexor muscles, and that's why we say trunk flexor endurance test. So that's one, and you're going to perform all of these individually, basically. So you do the flexor, trunk flexor test, and you can do a trunk extensor, or you can do the lateral, the side endurance test as well. And so the flexor, obviously the anterior front part of your body, right? The torso flexors at the hip and the trunk itself. Then you've got the extensor muscles, the lower back, the hip extensors, things like that. All of those muscles associated with the basic ability to maintain upright postural control. And then, of course, so there's front and there's back. And then you have two tests that you're going to do for the lateral endurance capability of your client. And so you're going to do like this side endurance test that they're going to show you, obviously. So just a very general explanation. The idea is to understand that obviously there's a front, there's a back, and there's a left side and a right side of the torso. And remember, the core, if you remember what the core is, it is all of those elements, all those components from essentially the lower part of the sternum, or at least the sternum, all the way down to the floor of the pelvis for the most part, right? So the torso muscular endurance test battery is going to be an individual test for the flexors, individual test for the extensors, right? Postural muscles, and then an individual test for the left side, lateral, right side, right lateral testing. And so on page 413, they're going to explain to you, right, for sure, optimal functioning of core muscles, help clients perform ADLs, activities of daily living. Please keep in mind, these are really terms used in physical therapy, occupational therapy, things like that. So just the idea of an ADL, just so you get the idea, these are used in more clinical settings. Trainers don't normally talk about ADLs or activities of daily living, but there is a flavor to this testing that ACE wants you to kind of understand. So when they say ADLs, they're just talking about everyday activities, lifting a heavy laundry basket, or recreational activities like swinging a golf club. Okay, yes, technically that is true, but just keep in mind, this is sort of a side element here. The term, and when you see the three letters ADL or ADLs, technically that is a very precise term that is used in the world of therapy, both physical and particularly occupational therapy. So ADLs, activities of daily living. Nevertheless, that's sort of your little overview. And as you go through pages 414 all the way to page 419, that's going to be the McGill's test information, how to actually your pre-assessment procedures. Most of them are pretty straightforward. Not that you have to memorize a whole lot of this, but the procedures are explained for you. And so ACE wants you to do the trunk flexor endurance test. That's what they're showing you first. The next will be the trunk lateral, so both sides of the trunk. And then finally, the trunk extensor endurance test on 417. I got some good pictures here, figures 10, 27, 28. Obviously, of course, they're also showing you those muscles that are representative of what you're actually testing. So, as for instance, the quadratus lumborum, right, for the lateral component of the testing, that's kind of what we're looking for. Also understand that, yes, of course, the internal, external obliques, there's the transverse abdominis, all of those muscles are core muscles. But specifically, ACE wants you to kind of get an idea that we're targeting the endurance capabilities of these specific muscles, such as the quadratus lumborum, and of course the flexor muscles of the torso and the core are going to be your rectus abdominis, obviously. And so it's not a bad idea, of course, to know these, but that's your general sort of overview of this McGill's test or battery of testing. But from a purely testing perspective, now here's what you got to be considering. There's kind of two sides to this. First off is ACE is giving you some really good information, and this is a standard test that is used not necessarily by commercial health club trainers. More so, again, you're going to see this for sure, perhaps in more clinical type settings. But in this case, they want you to know that it's a good indicator. It's helpful to know this information, which is why the testing is in here. So if you want to do this in the real world and you want to do this type of testing, absolutely nothing wrong with it. Could be very helpful. It doesn't take much time to do it. Apparatus is really simple. Of course, as ACE tells you, you've got to be careful, though. If you don't just do it because it's in the textbook. You do it because you and your client have made the decision. I guess in some way you can say you and your client, but you have made a decision based on those attributes that your client already displays that would make sense for you to do this. Now, from a purely testing perspective, when you take the ACE exam, there's always the question of, well, what are they going to ask you? And in that case, for the most part, your procedures, what muscles are being sort of tested, fairly important. But the most important thing is to go to page 419, because at the very top of 419 are the results of the battery, the test battery. So you're basically going to get a time element that goes along with each of the tests. So when you do your first test to check the endurance capabilities of the trunk flexors, you're basically timing it. You put your client into this position, proper position. They show you that. And then you're going to time how long they can maintain this appropriate position. In the case of the trunk flexor test, they're basically on the ground, knees bent, and they lean back roughly 45 degrees with their back straight. And then as soon as they start to lose control of that position, bing, that's it. Time is done. How long were they able to maintain that position? 30 seconds, a minute, 40 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever that is, you're basically going to write it down. So, and that's what you're seeing on figure 1032. They're basically ACE is giving you the record sheet. So trunk flexor endurance test, time to completion. How long did it take for them to break form or not be able to maintain the position that you had them in originally? What is it? 30 seconds, 20 minute, whatever the case is. Then you're going to do your trunk lateral endurance test on the left side. One of the things about the lateral endurance test, by the way, is you got to do it on both sides. It's very important because one of the analyticals that you're going to get is this balance between left and right side. And I would I would venture to guess this is one of the main issues that I've seen with clients is this imbalance with left and right side lateral stabilization. Now, don't get me wrong, there's clients are a hot mess in many ways, right? I'm just saying that in this case, those laterals, that could be a real problem for folks. Lower back, same thing. It's all potentially a problem. But that's why you got to do both sides. Don't just do one side, obviously. Do both sides, left and right side. It's going to be the same thing. Right side time to completion, left side time to completion. And then you're going to do, and by the way, on page 418, figure 1030, you'll see the trunk extensor endurance test. And if you got to do it modified, you might see a question like that. What would be the modified position of the trunk in the McGill's battery test, the trunk extensor position? And it would be obviously the individual on the floor instead of having them on the table where you're having the torso come forward and or maintain that torso position, as you can see in figure 1030. So once you do this, same thing, you're going to time it. How long does it take for them to break technique and form? And you got to be really, really careful when you do this, right? So real world, if you're really going to do this, take a look at this. Take a look at the figure over here of doing this endurance test with somebody. You got to be really careful, and you've got to be pretty precise when you start to see the break in form, because the goal here is to get a pretty accurate ratio of the times, and that's what we want to do in the McGill's test. So you're getting 4 times, right? Trunk flexor, time to completion, the extensor muscles, and then left and the right side, okay? And you write those down. Now go to the top of page 419. This is where the bread and butter is when it comes to the testing, which is what ACE more than likely is going to ask you at least one or maybe multiple questions on. And now all you do is you take the time to completion, whatever it is, 60 seconds, could be 120. Remember, it's in seconds. And you're doing everything in seconds so you can get an appropriate ratio. What is a ratio? It's a numerator and a denominator. So it's one number over another number. And you can calculate it, right? So if it's 120 seconds over 100 seconds, it's 120 divided by 100. You put that in your calculator and it gives you a decimal. Okay, because that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a ratio in the form of a decimal. And so there's going to be 3 analyticals that you're going to get from this. The first one is the time to completion of the flexion test, right? Or the ratio between the flexion testing time and the extensor time. So if it takes, just use any number, 90 seconds before they broke form on one and 120 seconds before they broke form on the other, that's a ratio. And a ratio means it's one divided by the other. And in this case, it is the flexion extension ratio. And it should be less than 1.0. Okay, let me kind of analyze that for you. For example, a flexion score of 120 seconds. So you had them do this, right? You had them do the flexion test, and they're doing this, and 100, and and you're at a minute and whatever, right? So 118 seconds, 119 seconds, 120 seconds, and they break form. Boom, it was 120 seconds. That's great. So you wrote that down. Then you did your lateral testers, or you did your trunk extensor test after that. And your extension score came out to be 150 seconds. So obviously, they were able to hold the extension test 30 seconds longer than the flexion test. Not that that matters. The point is that 120 seconds to fatigue failure, 150 seconds. Well, that's what the ratio is. The ratio is 120 divided by 150. That is the ratio. That would give you, generates a ratio score of 0.8. Do it on your calculator. Put me on pause and do 120. Come on, it's 120 divided by 150 will give you 0.8. Okay, remember? If you have any problems with this, you need to just kind of practice it a little bit. This is basic arithmetic. All you got to do is 120 over 150. It gives you 0.8. So if it is below 1.0, meaning, think about this. If the ratio is below 1.0, that means that the extensor test was longer than the flexion test. 120 flexion, 150 extension. 120 over 150 will always, remember, if the numerator is smaller than the denominator, it's going to be less than 1.0. And in this case, this example gives you 0.8, right? So all they're telling you is that the flexion extension ratio should be below 1.0. So that's a great question to ask on an exam. If the flexion extension ratio, your client has a flexion extension ratio, McGill's test battery, flexion extension ratio of 1.1, 1.2, that's not good, right? That means that it's not that their trunk flexors are better. It means that their trunk extensor muscles are not capable of maintaining proper endurance. So I hope you understand this on page 419. That first ratio needs to be less than 1.0, and that's what you would write. Make sure you're rewriting this information. So flexion extension ratio less than 1. As long as it's less than 1, your client's in good shape. Now, the next analytic that you're looking at is the right side bridge, left side bridge scores. And they should be no greater than 0.05 from a balance score of 1.0. In other words, 0.95 to 1.05. This is why it doesn't matter which one you use as your numerator or your denominator. Now, again, they're going to give you an example. For example, a right side bridge, 88 seconds. Again, remember, you already got this information. You already took it. You already went like this, boom, 88 seconds. Why they chose 88, I don't know. 88 seconds and a left side bridge score of 92 seconds. You see the two numbers? Is that a problem that one is you were able to hold one side 4 seconds longer? Not, I don't think so. Let's find out. Second generates a ratio score of 0.96, which is within the 0.05 range from 1.0. Stop, rewind the video if you need to. It's really very simple. 88. Let me do it. Let me do it on my calculator here for you. Do it with me. It's really pretty straightforward. I don't want you to think a whole lot about this. 88 seconds divided by 92 seconds. 0.956. So it's 0.96 for the most part. Now watch. This is why it doesn't matter if you do the right side over the left side or left side over the right side. So 0.96 is within 0.05, isn't it? Yeah, 0.95 plus 0.95 is 1.0. So what if I did it the other way around? What if I did the left side bridge score of 92 divided by 88? Watch. Okay, well, let me do that. 92 divided by 88. What do you think it's going to come out as? It's going to be like 1.05, something like that. And it's 1.045 or 1. You get the idea? That's why it doesn't matter if you do the left side number over the right side number or the right side number over the left side. Just go with the lower, below 1.0 or above 1.0 by 0.05. Ideally, what should it be? It should be 1.0. In other words, I should have my endurance capability on my left side should be exactly the same as the right side, right? It should be exactly the same. They're probably not going to be. And if it's only by a couple of seconds, you can see the difference. What happens if one side has a lot more endurance than the other? Well, that number is going to be either below 0.95 or above 1.05. That's going to be outside of the normal range. Okay, you got to know that. Now, the last analytic. So you got your first analytic is the front side of the body to the rear, flexion extension ratio. The next is the lateral ratios. Those should be pretty even. Now we want to see the lateral over the extensor, trunk extensor ratio. Okay, so side bridge, either side, doesn't matter. Extension ratio should be less than 0.75, for example. Okay, so you get the number. What is it for flexion extension? Come on, you should memorize already. Less than 1. Simple. What should the side left and right side lateral ratios be? Ideally, it should be 1.0, or within a 0.05 range, below or above, depending on which one you had as the numerator and the denominator. Now we want to check the side lateral endurance ratio compared to the extensor ratio, and that number should be less than 0.75. Here's an example. A right side. So they used a right side bridge score of 88 seconds and an extension score of 150. They're just using the information there. It generates a ratio score of 0.59. Well, just because they didn't do it here, let's use, remember, that was the right side bridge. Let's use the left side bridge of 92 seconds that they gave us there as well. So 92 divided by 150 seconds gives us 0.61. You're good to go one way or the other. 0.61 is less than 0.75. There is a pretty decent buffer zone here. So if you're a little bit off on your lateral times, it's still going to be significant, probably significantly lower than the 0.75. Ultimately, from a testing perspective, please keep in mind those are your go-to numbers. Okay, now let's do it again. What is the first analytic you're going to get? Flexion extension ratio. You should be able to hold your extension position longer than your flexion, right? So flexion's on top, extension's below. The number's got to be less than 1. If it's above 1, that's a problem, right? That means that the extensor endurance capability is probably less than it should be. Not that the flexors are really strong. So they should be less than 1. What's the next analytic that you got? Which one is it? Right, side to side, your lateral numbers, right over left, left over right. It doesn't matter. Whatever that comes out as, it should be within what? 0.05. So 1.0 would be perfect symmetry endurance-wise between left and right side. 90 seconds one side, 90 seconds the other. Simple, it's 1.0. 88 seconds one side, 90 seconds another side. That's within the 0.05 range, right? Below or above the 1.0. And then what is the third analytic? Either side, doesn't matter which one you use, provided that they're within normal ranges. Either side ratio to the extensor, right? And that should be what? Below 0.75. You got it? McGill's test or battery of tests. Helpful, effective, because now if everything's good, I just proceed with my normal programming. If I do have deficits, now ACE will help you to a certain extent to address some of those. Basically, what you're doing is now you're just going to strengthen, stretch, and lengthen those appropriate muscle groups or those areas of the body in the core that will get those ratios back to, quote, normal or within standards. Keep in mind that if you want more information on how to pass the ACE exam, we're talking about the exam prep course. That's in the description box below. Just click on that link. And you're going to get everything from quizzes, practice exams, all the way to chapter level videos that go over the entire chapter, study guide, audio textbook that goes along with it as well. We have an entire suite of Quizlet study sets that go along with each chapter. Remember, there's a lot of information. Some of it you don't really need to know from a testing perspective, and there's areas that you should be really well focused on, okay? And that's kind of what we're doing here, is helping you with that particular area. So click on the link in the description box below. If you got some benefit from the video, at least you understood it, makes more sense to you now, go ahead and click understood or understand in the comment section below as well. We're here to help you out at Body Design University. Also, keep in mind, every Wednesday night, we do a Quizlet live exam study, 30 minutes, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's Central, Mountain, Pacific. You got to do the numbers, right? If you live in California, for instance, it's not 6 p.m. It's 3 o'clock your time, but we do it for 30 minutes. A lot of fun, very helpful. Remember to come on board with us. Have a great week. We'll see you next week. Bye.